Welcome everybody to Rob's MetalWorks. Yes, we are starting out here our 27th year at the program in 2023. And it brings me great pleasure to welcome a man who's impacted so much music in our city and around the region. Brings me great pleasure to welcome the man, CLIFTON Miles. Many of you people out there know him. Welcome, Clif, back to our studio.
What's up, man?
Great to see you again, bro.
Yeah, you too.
I always love seeing you, man, because you always have like this radiance about you. You smile, and you're a positive dude, and I know you you like the GQ look. I see all your pictures on Facebook. Thanks, and stuff.
I try to stay fresh, you know.
Yeah, you look. That's a perfect word. You look fresh all the time. So much ground to cover, and I got my notes here. And like I just said, you've impacted so many people's lives. And, when we're young, we're teenagers, we don't think about producers and engineers. We just want to hear the music and whether we like it or not. But you have really churned out so much great music in our city in the past several years. So really, that's kind of where I want to start. So are you originally from San Antonio?
Mm-hmm. Born and raised.
Yeah? What high school did you go to?
Madison.
Ah, Madison.
Yeah.
Is that Northeast or?
Yeah, NEISD.
NEISD, yeah.
I floated around. I mean, I started off Jackson Keller Elementary, which is over by Lee. Lee High School.
Yeah.
And I went to Bradley Middle School, which is like Brook Hollow and 281.
Yeah.
I just moved further north.
Yeah.
And then I went to Madison, which is like Judson and 1604.
Yep.
Area.
Yeah.
And I still kind of live out in that area.
Nice. Yeah, you always stick to your roots, right?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you earlier, like, how far away you are, but that's a nice little drive.
Some cool people in the scene went to Madison, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like who? Who would you?
Kobe and Joe from Wings of Abaddon or Cerebral.
That's true.
Lyle Cooper, who is the drummer of the Faceless.
Yeah.
Went to Madison. Dude that he's in a band with now, Marlon, went to Madison also. There's a lot of cool Madison love out there.
Wow.
Some good metal dudes from Madison.
Is that what when you would say that your love for heavy music started at that time, or was it later?
Middle school.
Wow, earlier.
School. Yeah, I got into metal in middle school. My cousin Chris introduced me to Korn. Life is Peachy, and the OG like Limp Bizkit, $3 Bill, y'all.
Yeah.
And then I kind of took the ball and ran with it. Found everything I could.
I know you like heavy stuff too, because like At the Gates, heavy.
Yeah. That's not my like my forte. I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan, but my heart is with like new metal.
Oh, okay,
like, like the late '90s new metal. Limp Bizkit, Korn, Tool, Deftones.
Wow.
That stuff. That's the stuff that's like, I'll listen to it all day, every day, and never get tired. The extreme stuff is cool too. You know what I mean? I love it, everything. Black Dahlia, Whitechapel, Darkest Hour, the melodic death, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But,
wow.
But yeah, I like it all.
That's cool, man. I kind of hear like a lot of buzz now in the national scene that new metal's coming back. You kind of believe that?
I mean, man, I would like to believe it, but I don't. It's weird, man. I don't know if you listen to like the newer, some of the newer records. Limp Bizkit's a good example, right? Mm-hmm. It just doesn't work anymore. I think it's because of the recordings.
I was about to say that.
It doesn't work anymore. I mean, those bands like had a vibe and a mojo to them that just through trends and the way people record now, it's just not the same. That new record, like, it just doesn't hit the same. You know what I mean? To me, at least.
Is that because there's no Ross Robinson in the back end?
A little of that, yeah.
Was he someone that you kind of liked, or?
Yeah. He's not, I would say, yeah. I mean, I'm a huge fan. Yeah, I mean, if I ever met him, I'd probably geek out, because it's like he's like a kind of a god in our scene. You know what I mean? Discovered so many bands, and obviously like one of my favorite records of all time, if I had to make a list, like number one would probably be that self-titled Slipknot. That'd probably be my favorite album head to toe, you know what I mean? And he did that by himself. And the thing about Ross is like he wasn't a great mixer, you know what I mean? And his records sound pretty pretty raw. You know what I mean? Pretty bad even by some people's taste. Like that first Korn record, the second Korn record, that self-titled Slipknot. They don't really sound that great. You know what I mean? But they're special because of the energy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the energy like makes them fucking awesome.
Right.
And that was his thing. You know, he would. Have you heard the stories?
A little bit. I can't quite recall.
Man, I mean, there's stories of him, in particular, like doing that Slipknot record, where he was trying to get them in the mood, like it wasn't pissed off enough, right? So he'd be in the studio with them and like throwing candles at dudes' heads while they're playing, like literally fucking punching them in the gut, like literally like spitting in their faces, cussing at them, you know, like crazy, like whatever you can to just get them more amped up. And and you hear it, you know what I mean? You hear like that's Slipknot record, and it's insane. That's the kind of guy that dude was, you know.
Whatever happened to him? I don't hear much about him.
He's still doing it. Yeah, it's just he's not like he did the last or one of the last Suicide Silence records. And my buddy Joe Barisi mixed it. But that's the thing, is like he doesn't mix. He can't really, not that he can't, it's just that sound is not a thing anymore. So anytime you record stuff, other dudes mix it. It sounds really good. Yeah. But he's still doing it.
Yeah, cool. So back at that time, you know, once you started getting a little older and were in high school and stuff and really were getting into music, were you in any bands at all? Yeah. That's something that I always I didn't really think about until you released that record, Start a War, back, I think it was in 2016 that you did that. Something like that. So I was like, man, I didn't know.
I forget that I did that.
Yeah, really? I still jam that record.
Yeah, man, it's cool. Thank you.
It reminds me of At the Gates.
Thank you.
But I always thought, I'm like, man, I didn't know that he could play an instrument, or that he was, you know, wanted to perform or be in a band. And so as I was getting prepared for today, I was like, man, I wonder, you know, if he was in bands when he was younger. And that's how he got into music. Yeah.
So when I was in high school, maybe I would say like maybe sophomore year, I discovered like a little pocket in San Antonio of like a hardcore scene.
Yeah.
Like punk, like hardcore, like a Minor Threat, right? Like, like fast, you know, real
Fearless Iranians from Hell.
Like punk. It's like hardcore, you know, like hardcore punk, and I liked it. You know, I always tell people I got into hardcore like through the back door of like new metal. Most people get into hardcore because they listen to punk, you know, listen to No Effects or Bad Religion or, you know, MXPX, whatever, and they get into hardcore, and it's faster, it's a little more aggressive. And there was a scene, you know, here in town of, I would say probably no more than at the time maybe 80 people, but there, I mean, almost everyone would show up to every show, you know, and we were doing these shows in garages, in tire shops, you know, stuff like that. It was real underground, like real DIY, and that was what was like, you know what, I could do this, and I had been playing guitar like in my garage, so I decided to make a hardcore band, and my hardcore band was kind of inspired by a band called Most Precious Blood, who's out of New York, and they were on like Trustkill Records, you know, if you remember them, and it was fast, it was sloppy, you know, it was kind of gross, you know, but it was loosely inspired by that, and also, you know, some of the stuff that was kind of trendy at that time, which is like Norma Jean and some of that early metalcore stuff, and we were playing these tiny shows, and eventually we started playing shows at Sin 13. We kind of like evolved into Sin 13. Angel found us, you know what I mean? Wow. And you know, myself and, you know, a lot of guys in that scene started to get into like promoting, right, booking shows at Sin 13, and eventually, you know, started doing some shows at the Rabbit, and, you know, Rick didn't like the type of moshing that these guys would do, because it's not traditional mosh pit pushing stuff. These guys, when they mosh, it looks like ninja kicks and it's that kind of stuff, right? And he didn't like it. So there was a famous incident with the local band with All Sincerity. They played the Rabbit for the first time, and Rick saw the people moshing like that and banned them. It's like a real famous story.
Wow.
And in that scene, right? And I started playing. My band started playing in that scene, and then we ended up breaking up after a couple years, and I made another band that was more along the lines of what the Start of War was, more of a melodic death metal. And then I followed Angel to the Sanctuary. And we started booking shows at the Sanctuary.
I remember the Sanctuary.
And we gigged for a couple years around that time, 04, 03, 04. And then did a little tour around the West Coast and California, and that was kind of the end of my playing time. But it was during that time frame that I met Bobby Mercer of Meek, and he owned a little home studio called the Looney Bin. And
is he the drummer from Meek?
No, he was the guitar player. He's since passed.
Oh, okay.
He's R.I.P. to him. But that was, my initial inspiration for kind of getting into recording and piquing my curiosity. We actually went to go record with him. He became kind of the guy. He was kind of, I guess what I ended up becoming before I was me.
So he kind of exposed you to the workings of recording.
Excuse me. Yeah, I had never been in a studio prior to going to his house. Yeah. And he had a really cool setup. I mean, his desk was in a room, and he had all his stuff, and then the drums and everything was in the garage, and it was routed all through like the attic, right? And so it was, to me, it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Sound is happening over there, but I'm hearing it in here, and it's like the cables and like the gear, and it's like I realized at that point I was more interested in this than I was actually playing in a band.
Why did that intrigue you, though? I mean,
I don't know, man. It was something. It just grabbed me. It was something about it that just grabbed me, and instantly. So then it was like, I need to figure out a way to get into this environment more. And so I started bringing him bands from our scene, that hardcore scene. Started bringing him bands. At the
and you
time,
would be there while they were recording. And so
I would be there, and then I, would lend a hand, move a mic stand or whatever, ask questions, and sort of just be exposed to the process.
Like a little apprenticeship.
His process. Not official, you know what I mean? Yeah. But you just a fly on the wall kind of thing, just absorbing it, and really, really enjoyed that.
I think a lot of fans, like I alluded to earlier, they don't really think about all the hard work that goes into creating a great song, recording a great song or a record. And I think there's some people too, because I've had these conversations with different musicians, but I think there's people who don't really understand the difference between engineering and producing. Mm-hmm. So can you elaborate a little bit on that from your vantage point? What is the difference between the two, and how do you kind of correlate all the different components of recordings, like earlier or producing, because you talked about earlier, like there's like recording and there's mixing and then there's mastering. So there's so many different steps and processes that go into the final product. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So these days, guys that do what I do, we wear all the hats. Yeah. For the most part. And it didn't used to be like that. You used to have a producer whose job was to work with the band to inspire them and corral them to get on the same page. And basically, he's the coach, essentially, right? His job is to make sure that the record sounds great, music-wise, basically. Like, hey,
playing-wise.
Playing-wise, energy-wise. Yeah. Are the songs good? Should we be playing that many times? Right. That chorus isn't really popping the way it could. Let's add this. Let's take that away. The producer's like a general coach of the music, right? Right. And he's there to offer feedback and make sure that everyone's kind of staying in line with his vision, but the band's vision also. A lot of guys, like Ross, for example, we were talking about him earlier. He had, his whole thing was raw, raw, intense, raw, and intense. And so if you weren't hitting the standard of intense, you know, he was going to get you there.
Right.
Like throwing shit at you and all that stuff. Guys like Terry Date, you know, who worked with Pantera and Deftones and whatnot. You know, his whole thing was being in the room with the guys and watching them rehearse things and making suggestions about the music and getting these guys gelling and capturing moments, seeing things that guys are doing maybe while they're just goofing around and saying, hey, like maybe you should actually try doing that.
Right.
And capturing moments, you know. Everyone's got different styles and approaches, but most guys have a vision when they start a project. That's the producer. Engineer is someone that is handling more of the technical aspect of like, I'm putting a microphone on a drum and I'm making sure that the sound that's coming through the monitors is appropriate, you know, right? We're not messing this up, you know what I mean? Like we're miking this drum the best way possible. So we're not getting too much bleed from other things, but we're getting the best possible sound out of all these microphones. And their job sometimes, and most of the time, is to also sit there and man the board, you know, pressing stop, record, etc., while the producer will yell at people.
Right.
Excuse me. And once those guys' job is done and they've like worked their way through that process, then it would get turned over to whoever's mixing it.
Right.
And then he would run it through his board and his gear and his ear in a different studio in a different environment, and sometimes a different city. And he would put it all together, balancing everything, you know, EQing, compressing things to make sure everything's working together. Starts to sound like a song, right? Then he would bounce it down to a, you know, basically a 2-track, right? And then that would get sent to another dude in another studio as the mastering guy. And again, different set of ears, different environment, and he would put his final touch on it. So back in the day, you'd have a team of like 5 or 6 dudes on a record. I mean, that's at a minimum, right? And there'd be assistant engineers and interns and runners, and depending on the budget, you know what I mean? But it was really cool because you had so many experts, you know, or so many different sets of ears and so many different environments and studios and sets of gear that these songs are just getting baked through, right? And that's the difference between when you hear a lot of those like badass records from like the mid 90s, late 90s or prior, right? Since the 50s, 60s, 70s, you know, same idea, right? Different studios, different sets of ears, different gear. Those records have a mojo. When everything kind of shifted to the computers and dudes started wearing all the hats, I feel like the recordings have lost a great deal of that mojo.
Because there's less people.
It's less decision makers. You got one guy kind of seeing the whole thing A to Z in the same spot with the same gear, and sounds sometimes sterile.
Right.
You know, sometimes plain, boring. Those are words I would use.
Yeah.
You know, not one person in particular. I'm saying in general, right? Yeah. The recordings to me just don't sound the way they used to, and that's something that I actively try to avoid myself.
What would you say is the most challenging part of all those different roles? Which one is the hardest?
For me, the most challenging part is the actual engineering of the record. Yeah. You know, sitting there with the band, do it again, 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 do it again. You know what I mean? Like until we finally land there. You know, until it's okay. That's the good combination of. That has good energy. There's no errors. You played it clean. It's not sloppy. You're on time.
Yeah, on time.
And all those things. And that's really because I kind of have like ADHD. I don't like to sit in one space for too long. And I like to get up and walk around, move around. And sometimes you're pinned down for 4, 5, 6 straight hours just on one part of a song. You know, just over and over and over and over. Wow. And it starts to wear on you mentally.
I can imagine.
You know, you're like, man, you know, I don't really talk about this a whole lot, but for me, I'm not. I only engineer records so I can get to mix them. You know, to me, I'm trying to get to that. That's what I enjoy. I could do that for days and days and days, for hours. I didn't do that 75 hours a week and wake up bright and early the next morning and get back at it and love life. You know,
so that's your favorite part?
Mixing is my favorite part. That in my world is like I'm working to get to that, you know. And so yeah, that's my favorite part.
I know that eventually, you know, you started your own studio, Deadroom, right?
Yes, sir.
That was in
2008.
2008. Wow. You were a pretty young cat at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I always kind of think about, when I think about producers and engineers, I'm like, man, you see their work and it's like, it seems like very complex. Like there's a lot of stuff that you got to know, a lot of knowledge that you have to have, especially working with gear and then, the evolution of gear, because there's always new shit coming out, right? Especially these days. So when did you, at that time in 2008, what made you feel like I'm ready to start my own studio?
Yeah,
because that's a big jump. I mean, a risky kind of move too. Yeah, because you have to invest in all this equipment.
Yeah, so I started dabbling in 2006 as my gigging days were kind of coming to an end. I started to put my time into recording little demos for bands with just very base level stuff, right? Just out of my mom's house. Yeah. I was 19 years old.
Oh, wow.
And not 19, 20. And I just was practicing doing that, and didn't have anything that was really worth a shit. It was very cheap stuff from Guitar Center, $200 interface. Mike, SM57s, 5 or 6 of those, and just doing the best with what I had.
You're talking Chinese to me, but I get it.
Yeah. I mean, just cheap stuff. Yeah. And I had a really good time doing that. In that time frame around 2007 to late 2006, I started a career. I was actually selling cars. I was like full blown. This is what I'm gonna do the rest of my life. Right. I'm gonna sell cars. I loved it. I was very good at it. Right. I was making a lot of money real young. Yeah. I bought a house. The house I still live in now. Was driving a new vehicle, and I started, investing a lot of money into recording equipment. Oh, okay. And I was like, I really like doing this, and I got the money, and I don't have, wife or kids, and I got a house, so let's start doing this, right?
Before that, though, you were inviting, when you first started inviting bands to your mom's house to record?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did your mom say?
Oh, she was cool.
She supported you?
Yeah, she was cool.
Did she understand what you were doing?
Yeah. I mean, my mom's been cool about stuff like that, my whole life. Jam in the garage or, play guitar or whatever. Yeah. She's never really got in the way of any of that stuff.
You're like, turn that drum set off.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, surprisingly, no. I mean, if she did, I can't remember. You know what I mean? But
you didn't care. You didn't care.
Yeah, I mean, I was
okay, Mom. Whatever. We're almost done.
Yeah, I mean, I did recordings in storage units.
Wow.
Where bands would rehearse, I'd take my stuff to them. I did recordings in bedrooms, bathrooms. I was recording anywhere and everywhere back then, and. Funny story in there, something you might be interested in. 2007, I wake up, I have a ringing in my ear. I'm like, I've just been been recording about a year, right? But I'm like, been playing shows for years. I know what ringing in my ear sounds like, and this is very different.
Yeah,
and
that's bad, though.
Yeah, it was bad. And I was like, oh, this is not good. This is weird. And it was only on this side. And I ended up going to a doctor. Long story short, found out I had a benign brain tumor.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, and so I basically had to have literally brain surgery to remove a tumor from my brain.
Wow.
And in the process, they had to remove my hearing nerve. So I'm 100% deaf on the right side. I only hear out of the left side. So
Get the fuck out.
No, dude, yeah. Wow. I got one ear, man.
I hear a lot of people don't know that, huh?
Not a lot of people know that.
Not a lot of people would know that.
No, I keep it. I mean, I don't keep it on the DL. I tell everyone.
It's not on the DL anymore.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, I don't keep it on the DL.
Wow.
I mean, to me, I don't care because I used to when I was younger. I was a little maybe paranoid about letting people know that because I didn't want me being inexperienced, to judge me. Oh,
sure,
man, I don't know that I want to record with some dude with one ear, right?
Right.
But at this point, man, I've been doing it for so long. You people know I know what I'm doing. So I don't care anymore. And in fact, it was an inspiration to some people. I talked about it on a podcast a few years ago, and a lot of people reached out to me and were like, Joe, because the whole point was like, I see a lot of young guys that try to get into recording, and they're making a lot of excuses. Oh, I can't do this or can't do that. Blah, blah. I'm like, bro, dude, like, well, shut the fuck up, man. Like, I got 1 ear, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was able to do it. Like, if I can do it 1 ear, you can do it, man. Like, just do it, man. You just gotta do it. And you know, I like motivating people like that sometimes, but. Anyways, yeah, recovered from that brain tumor.
How long did that take to recover from that?
Oh man, so I lost function in like the right side of my face. I had like a Bell's palsy kind of situation for a while. I would say all in all, maybe about 8 months. Wow. I had to relearn how to walk. Wow. Your equilibrium. I didn't realize that your hearing nerve is part of your equilibrium. Right. So as soon as I came out of it, I had to like relearn how to walk. And, it took a while for my world to kind of stabilize. It was spinning. It was literally spinning. I had to take medications to like make it not spin. It was a really crazy time. Shout out to my buddy Rosendo. I haven't talked to him in a couple years, but he was actually the dude that like is the reason why this whole thing ended up happening. Because when this all happened, I was like, I can't record. Right. Like, this isn't even a thing anymore. Right. I just had the stuff and I just sat there. He called me out of the blue one day and he said, hey man, I really need to record some songs.
So you were done.
I was done. I was done. Yeah. I was 100% done. And he was like, I need to record some songs. And I was like, oh dude, I'm sorry, man. Like I only got 1 ear, man. Like I'm not really doing it. And he was like, why not? And I was like, because I only got 1 ear, man. And he was like, wait, you can still hear, will you just do this for me? And then when I started doing it, I was like, oh, I could still do this.
Yeah, that's great.
And then I did. And then I just kept going. And then I picked it back up. So I think I really only had like maybe 8 months, 10 months off where but a good chunk of that I was like, that sucks. I'm never going to be able to do that again. Yeah. It presents a some issues. Obviously, recording is stereo, most of the time, right? And so, I had to develop tricks to make sure that things over here are the same volume as they are over here, because that can be an issue, Right. Sometimes this cymbal might be a little louder than it's supposed to be, and I'll catch it. I'm like, oh, shouldn't I calm down over there, you know? But all in all, most people compliment my balance, my recordings.
You've adapted.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say that I've adapted, because this is all I know. Yeah, you know what I mean? I just made it work. You know? Yeah. You
have to have, I liked what you said earlier about, just go out there and fucking do it, dude. Yeah. And I think in order to kind of have that mentality, you really have to have the passion, and the passion, drives the drive, So
yeah.
I think some people got it, and then some people don't. They think, oh, I like working with bands, and then when they realize how challenging and how much hard work it takes to be successful at anything, it can get a little dissuading for some people, and they start making up excuses.
Yeah, well, it's not fun all the time.
Yeah,
I mean, it's often not fun. This is a job.
Yeah,
and I think people don't realize that. They think like, they see people, even like band dudes, they see other band dudes who are successful, and they're like, God, I wish I could have that life. But then you're in that position one day, and you're realizing you're in a van for 8 hours with a bunch of sweaty dudes making no money, eating pizza for free. It's not everything it's cracked up to be. And when people finally see that, sometimes it scares them off.
It's not always glamorous. No.
Rarely is it glamorous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I couldn't do that. I mean, I've seen a lot of touring musicians, and I've seen the lifestyle they live, and I'm like, oh, no, hell no.
Yeah,
it's not bed.
That's not for me,
I want some home-cooked meals.
Yeah.
At night. So, eventually, you partnered with your colleague now, Mac Damon, at ToneCrate. How did that relationship develop? Did you kind of know Mac from just, casual crossings, or was that something that you kind of were also doing some work at his studio, or what happened there?
Yeah, a little of all of that. Yeah, so Mac, Mac is somebody that I've looked up to, since the very beginning, because he owned a studio in town called Rhapsody Street Studios, which was, kind of the spot, if you were a good musician. That's one thing about Mac. He tends to try to stick with working only like with the best of the best.
Sure.
You know, and he turns down a lot of work,
Wow.
you know, because he just wants to only work with
Sure.
the cream of the crop.
Right.
And because of that, you know, he attracted a lot of work over there.
Sure.
And if you don't know Mac personally, he's a genius. Like, I'm not saying that like complimentary, like, oh, he's a fucking genius.
Yeah.
He's literally a genius.
Wow.
Like, he's a savant, like a
Really?
like brilliant
Sure.
brain. Like, he builds things with his hands, like, you know, soldering boards and
Wow.
like, he's an engineer, like, not just for audio, like, he builds things.
Real.
You know, he's an actual genius. You know, like, he's brilliant. And
I've never met that dude. I've never met him. I've never crossed
Yeah.
paths with him. I've heard a lot about him. I know that you hold him in high regard, and I've seen some of your posts. But I know he doesn't do a lot of like heavy stuff, which is probably why I haven't never met him. But you know, I know he's well respected. And stuff.
Yeah. He's dabbled. I know he did. He mentions it from time to time. He did that old humdrum record.
Okay.
And you remember those guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that record's, if you ever go back and listen to it, I think it's on Spotify. It sounds fucking dope. And, but anyways, yeah, we met or probably around 2009, 2010.
Okay.
I was doing it out of my house, right? Recording. And I was starting to build a little buzz. People started to know the name. I ended up somehow winning like best studio in San Antonio from The Current.
Wow.
And so it kind of like that kind of blasted me into like people's faces. And we met out in public and at a show and introduced each other. And I just knew that he was a wealth of knowledge, and he was super friendly, right? And real quick, he was like, hey, if you ever need anything or if you want me to listen to your stuff and whatever, like, I'll offer advice. You know, I know you're starting out and I'm here to help.
That's
it's
great,
real like welcoming, you know? And so I took advantage of that. I said, hey, yeah.
For sure.
And like, you know, we don't record the same kind of music, but that's what I liked, because even though we record different types of music, we have a similar attitude about the way we like things to be with the respective differences of the genres, right? We share a lot of similarities, and I felt like this would be cool for me to improve the quality and the clarity of my recordings, to start learning from a dude that does like, you know, essentially like pop music and country, you know, like those are very expensive, polished sounding records, right? So I started paying him to go and mix with me. So I would take my gear to his studio. We would set it up in his environment, and he would essentially, I would be mixing, and he'd be like, why are you doing that? Don't do that. Here's what you should do.
Oh, wow.
Here's where you're going wrong. Let's move this here. Let's do this. You see that? You see how that sounds better? And we did that, you know, for a few times a month, or a few times, you know, every so often, for a couple years. And in the process of doing that, we got to know each other. We would do, you know, late night taco dinners, and we became friends. Yeah. And then that relationship evolved into me using his studio, which at the time was Hollywood Studios over off like Callahan and I-10. I started subleasing his studio to record drums, and then I would take the drum tracks back to my house and finish them. Right. So I was like, once I recorded drums there, I never wanted to record drums at my house ever again or anywhere.
Right.
So that was, you know, starting to build trust, working together, spending time together,
and building that kind of like a business relationship.
Building a business relationship, and then also growing our friendship. And you know, we started to get closer and closer and closer and closer, and you know, eventually, you know, now we're talking about our personal lives, and we become, you know, like brothers, you know. Yeah. And 2018, you know, he's getting a little bit antsy about the situation that he's in. There's some things going on that he's not agreeing with in the background with the landlord and whatnot. And so he lets me know, hey, I'm probably gonna be making a move relatively soon, and I think, you know, me and you should go in on a spot together. Wow. And so we had a couple false alarms. We found a couple places that we thought were cool. They ended up not working out, and then eventually he reached the tipping point at that studio and said, I'm out, and we had nowhere to go. We didn't have a spot picked out yet. We're getting all the gear out, the next day he opens up, I don't know what that real estate, like Zillow or whatever, and he sees a 2,000 square foot log cabin in the middle of the woods that's 8 minutes from his house on private property in the Texas Hill Country. It's affordable for us. And we signed on it like within 24 hours.
Wow.
And that was the birth of Stone Creek. Yeah. And then it took us, it took him, I mean, he did most of the work, him and his, assistants and interns and people he knew, getting everything wired together. I mean, again, he's brilliant. So he, in his mind, is laying out, we're going to run wires from here to here, and I just stay out of the way. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? And it took him and the team, and I helped out where I could, probably about a month to get everything kind of situated. And then that's just to get things kind of in a state of being able to record. And then basically it's just been a continuous process ever since to getting to like where we are now. And even still now, it's not perfect. We're still working on it. Like, there's still things where, like, let's knock this wall down. Let's move this. Let's build this here. How can we make this better? How can we make this better? And just never ending.
I've seen, I'd love to go out there one day.
It's not far from here.
Yeah,
I just
invite
came from
me
here.
whenever you think it's cool for me to go out there, just for a couple of hours. I really want to check it out. I've seen the pictures and the inside log cabin setup. I like the fact that it's secluded.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that also kind of can contribute to helping musicians focus in what they're doing.
Yeah.
Real quick, I want to just quickly chat about something that you mentioned, which I think is quite intriguing. And you talked about how bringing in, another producer's perspective who doesn't do heavy music into that environment. And so in the past, I've also heard, national metal bands and say, oh, we're going to work with this producer. He's never done metal music, but we're going to go with it. And it, to me, I kind of like that idea because it brings like this whole new perspective to the heaviness. I mean, we're not going to change it to soft. It's a whole new perspective on mixing it, heavy records from someone who doesn't do that. And I think that's really cool. I mean, I think it's very smart.
Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned before, like my inspirations are the dudes that were killing it in the 90s.
Yeah.
Andy Wallace and Terry Date and Brendan O'Brien, those guys.
What about Max Norman? You like Max Norman? You know who that is?
It doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, he did some Megadeth records, and I know Dave Mustaine really speaks highly of him, but he's also a guy that when I think about producers, I think about him.
Yeah.
I think about Sneap.
Yeah, Sneap. Yeah.
We're gonna talk about him later. I
love to talk about Sneap.
We're gonna talk about it later.
Yeah. I mean, those guys, dude. I mean, I could talk about Andy Wallace for days and days. Like, that guy's a hero of mine. You familiar with him?
I am.
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, he mixed Nirvana's Nevermind.
Yeah.
He mixed Slayer's Rain and Blood,
yeah,
which actually got him the Nevermind. Kurt Cobain heard Slayer and was like, I want that dude to mix my shit.
Right.
He mixed Nevermind. Then he kind of was recording just a couple of, mixing a few artists in the mid 90s, but his thing, he's an older white dude. Like, he looks like I love the guy, and this is not a knock on him. He looks kind of like a grandpa.
Yeah.
He's a gray-haired older dude, right? But he's responsible for mixing like the cream of the crop of like new metal.
Yeah.
Seven Dust, Home.
Wow.
Freaking Slipknot, Iowa. System of a Down's Toxicity.
Wow.
At the Drive-In, Relationship Command, records in that time that were just, genre-defining records, right?
Right,
he's working on that stuff, and he's just the most chillest, like, old dude. And that guy's a huge inspiration for me. Just the way this shit sounds, his records, I think, sound incredible.
You said, hey, Rob, we're still evolving Stone Creek. I want to give you a minute or two just to kind of elaborate on the amenities of that studio. I know that many musicians that I've crossed paths with have always spoken highly about it. So for the young people out there or aspiring musicians who will watch this interview, share a little bit about, what makes Stone Creek special.
Yeah.
For them.
Yeah, Stone Creek. Our attitude and our thought process behind it was that we wanted something that was professional and refined, but had almost the comfort of like a home vibe, you know. So we kept the general like home aesthetic to the place. It's a log cabin, you know. It's 2 stories, and we essentially have 3 full studios in that one building. So there's an A room, there's my room, which we call the annex, and then there's a writing room upstairs. So it's on the 2nd story, the loft. And the ceilings are 19 feet tall, and we put mics over the entire room. The entire front to back, there's microphones.
Wow.
So when we record drums, a drum set may at any moment have up to 19, 20 microphones on it. And I would say half of them are just in the room, you know, in addition to the ones that are on the drums themselves. We really pride ourselves in our drum sounds. Like I mentioned, yeah, 3 full functioning studios. The A room is where the drum recording happens. My room, the annex, is where I do all my stuff. So all of the engineering of my records, guitars, bass, and vocals happens in that room. That's also where I mix. Yeah. The whole studio itself is located in Helotes. It's on 4 acres of private land.
Wow.
So we're not disturbing anyone. I mean, we've had guys come shoot guns in the back. It's like that wide open. You can shoot guns. It's super relaxed. The vibe is just very serene.
Right.
When you're out there, you're pretty close to town. I mean, we're 10, 15 minutes north of 1604, but you feel like you're disconnected, you know.
Sure.
We liked that destination studio kind of vibe. Similar to like Sonic Ranch, you know, out near El Paso. It's just secluded. I think that studio is on like a pecan farm or something crazy like that. But that's the whole vibe. We want people to feel like they're away. They can relax, be creative, be focused on what they're doing, but also have every tool necessary to make a good sounding record.
If people want to book time with you, what's the best way to do that?
Usually just emailing me, messaging me, calling me, texting.
And then you fit them in
in
your schedule.
Yes, sir.
Depending on what they want.
Yeah.
You see more bands now. And I'm going to talk about this later, but obviously, you know, we've seen transitions and changes in our music scene. You know, you see, you know, the young generation coming up now, and you know, there's new ways of doing things. Do you see more bands wanting to record singles versus EPs, or even versus LPs? That's a conversation I have a lot with different bands. You know, they're like, "Oh, we're gonna record singles, and then we're gonna compile them for an EP at the end of the year." Blah blah.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing?
I mean, I'm seeing that. Yeah, exactly. I personally don't like recording LPs, you know, like full-length albums. I don't like it at all.
Is it too long? Frustrating?
No, it's not frustrating. Well, it can be.
Yeah.
But it's just too much. Like these days, the way that we kind of look at it, and like it's the predominant like thought process is that people's attention spans are so short right now.
Sure.
And whether you drop a 4-song EP or an 8-song album, people are only going to really care like that day and maybe within a week or two after. So it's like you may as well spread out your content and have multiple small releases to keep your buzz up, as opposed to dropping 8 songs and then people care for a week and then they don't hear about you for a year.
After you invested all that time, energy, and money into that.
Yeah, I mean, I almost talk people out of recording.
Right.
I mean, even though it's kind of counterintuitive as a guy that like is still operating a business at the end of the day. It's like, you know, give me the money.
But that's great. I mean, that's like right there. Just with that statement alone, you're telling people, I care more about your art than I do about my own pocket.
Yeah,
and that says a lot.
Yeah,
that says a lot about you, Clif.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That's cool, man.
And for the record, we got to stop telling people I'm expensive. It's like every time a band's out here, you're like, man, he's expensive. Clif's expensive, man. He's pricey. I'm not.
Hey, it's the same thing, man. If I'm going to drink Natural Light one night, but I want to drink some good beer, I'm going to pay more for the Heineken. It's the same thing. You know, you got to pay more for the good shit. And let me tell you something. You know, I get bands sending me stuff all the time. I say, oh, who produced this? And then like a year later, they're like, I'm like, oh, who produced this? They'll send me another track, and I can tell the difference. I can totally tell the difference. I'm not gonna name drop anything, but that happened to me recently, and I was like, man, I can really tell the difference.
What do you mean? So they sent you a track, and it sounded like not that great?
No, it was the first one was great.
Oh, okay. And then they sent you someone else's work, and it wasn't as great.
2 new tracks, and it wasn't as great. It didn't pop. Like, you know, when you hear music in your stereo, in your car, you have a track comes on, it's nice and loud, and then another track comes on, it's low. Yeah, that's what I kind of meant. Yeah, you can tell. That either it was the mix or the mastering, or maybe it didn't get mastered, but it was I could tell the difference in the volume. Of the track. Even I didn't even touch my volume on my vehicle. So it was the recording or whatever.
For sure.
Now you have, I mean, worked with so many bands in our city, and I want to thank you, you know, on camera, because you and I have always had a cool relationship, and I always love when you kind of tell me like, Rob, you know, check this out, and you send me stuff to listen to, and mostly all of it I love. But I mean, you've done some amazing records that I have in my phone that I still listen to.
Thank you, man.
Ammo for my Arsenal, great recording. The work you did with Nahaya, the Violent Practice, we talked about Violent Practice.
Yeah.
The SKUM singles were great.
Thank you, man.
And then, you know, Roger Trevino stuff with Brave the Elements. All good stuff, man.
Thank you, man.
I love it all.
That.
So, you know, so many bands, and I'm leaving so many of them out. But, you know, when I was getting prepared, I was like, man, I want to ask Clif this question. So, initially, I want to know, off the top of your head, we're talking about just local bands, right? Like I said, local metal bands. Like, who are maybe 2 or 3 of your favorite bands that you had like great experiences with in the studio? Just maybe now I'm not just talking about the product or
like friends, like
like
guys that became buddies. Yeah. Ammo, man, Ammo from my Arsenal. Like those guys are like brothers now. You know what I mean? Like they were one of the first bands I ever got to work with. You know, in 2009, I did their first. I did like an EP, like a little like an EP for them, like 3 songs, right? Yeah. Then they came back and did a full length. Yep. It was called Capital Vices, and then pretty much every other year I did a record for them, and they were like my longest tenured client. Yeah. You know, I did everything up until recently. They finally, you know, were like, hey, it's nothing. We got to try something different at this point. You know what I mean? And so I was like, I understood, even though I was a little salty. Where you know?
That's the thing. That's something I don't understand too. And I think you had alluded to me months back that kind of SKUM had done the same thing too. And I just don't understand. I don't get it. How you're gonna go from here and then just kind of roll the dice and you're gonna end up down here somewhere.
I don't know, man. It's I love Ammo, so it's no knock on them. They know. I joke with them about it all the time. Like, you guys are fucking cheating on me and stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah. Come back to Daddy.
I'm waiting
for
you to come back.
Ammo, if you're watching this, Daddy's ready for you, baby.
Come back.
Yeah.
And they will.
But I mean, hopefully, man. To me, they're like my Deftones, man. Like if I'm Terry Day, man, one day they're gonna come back and we're gonna make a fucking dope record again. But you know, I wouldn't say like I don't want to, you know, paint the picture that like if you're not recording with me that you're not going to get a good product or anything like that, because that's not true. There's a lot of people that are doing a great job. But what you were saying, I think what you're alluding to is like guys that are going to go from recording with me and, you know, in my environment with my tools to then going and doing it by themselves at home. And that is something that I think you don't want to take that experience away from a musician, right? You don't want to like shame them for that, because everyone wants to do that. You know, I did. You know what I mean? It's like they want and I like to think that when they see me work, I kind of maybe make it look easier than it is, right? And we're just pushing buttons but I think a lot of times people don't realize, I mean, I've spent years and years to build up the equipment that I have and the experience that I have to where it it looks like I'm kind of just throwing stuff up, right? But it's all, there's a reason I put the mic right there, and it's not, I'm putting, flashlights in there, you know what I mean? Like everything's happening for a reason, right? But it's just, they walk into the setups and it's just ready to go. On the flip side of that, software is great these days. People are programming drums. I mean, like one of my buddies, a great friend of mine whom I respect a great deal, Brian Eckerman, and he runs his entire studio off of, programming drums and amp simulators, and murders it. Thinks he does a fucking great job, right? But I can't do that. I don't have the skill set to make software drums sound good. He does, right? So like, to say that it can't be done would be foolish, but most people don't have Brian's ear, and his skills, right? And so, I love SKUM, and I definitely, hope the best for them, but I do understand they got to go through that process, you know what I mean? And whatever comes of it, cool. If they like it, then great, then they won, you know what I mean? But if they want to come back, I'll definitely welcome them back. I love those guys. They're like little baby brothers, It's weird, man. I'm getting to an age now where like some of these cats are like, maybe could be like my children, you know what I mean? Like I think those dudes are like 19 years old, man. I'm gonna be 37, and I'm like, man, if I started early, like you could have been my
I could be your dad. Listen to me.
Yeah, one of my assistants, my assistant engineer for a whole year, was a guy named Matt Sapperman. I love Matt. Him and I had some conversations. We become real good friends with people you work with, in that environment. And he told me, he's like, hey, you remind me of my dad. And I'm like, whoa, man, I'm not. I wasn't ready to hear that.
That might have been a compliment on your end.
Yeah, I'm like, oh man, I appreciate that, but never say that again.
You're right, and I've always been a big fan of Brian Eckerman's stuff, and I know that he's talked to me before about the stuff that he does with the drums, and again, most of it's Chinese to me, but as someone who actually kind of works in the industry, and then I know there's music fans who are purists and say you shouldn't be. I'm not sure that I'm totally buying the digital drums. I'd rather have recorded drums or
there's a lot of people that say that.
Yeah, there's a lot of purists out there.
And I would say 90% of them wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
I would agree. But it's so funny. When the first new Metallica song came out, that Lux Eterna, somebody posted, I think it was Carlos Lopez from Deadpool.
Yeah, the drums were fake.
Yeah, he said the drums were fake.
Yeah, they're programmed.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not. Because
I couldn't. I mean, again, I couldn't tell. I'm part of that 90%.
I mean, it's gotten to a point where I can't tell sometimes. I mean,
but if they are fake, it bothered him. I think that's why he said something about it.
Just didn't sound like Lars, But that's what I was leading to earlier. Right? Like, where's the vibe? Like, if we can't tell if this shit's programmed, that's a problem, right? Because we're wanting to hear that dude play. Not me. I don't really like the way he drums, but like the energy was good, right? Well, the energy's not there. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound like Metallica. That to some people might be cool because again, a lot of people don't like the way that guy drums. So to have something that sounds so tight and precise is kind of cool. But then it's like, for people that are, like you said, elitists or purists or whatever, they might want to complain about it.
Yeah, right.
At the end of the day, what are you listening to? You know what I mean?
And I think that's a good point. When you're recording, you might lose the vibe.
That to me is everything. That's 100% of like what motivates me when I do what I do is the vibe. Is just that one. I call it mojo vibe. One of the reasons I go out to LA and I take those classes with, become friends with Joe Breesy, man. Like, that dude's records are vibe, 100% vibe.
Yeah.
It's real.
That's so cool.
Recording Tool, Slipknot, Alice in Chains, like, vibe. You know what I mean? It's all vibe. It's real. Dude's jamming in a room and he's killing it. You know what I mean? And it's just think that shit's lost.
With so much evolution in the industry that, you've seen and that is still happening, I mean, you have to stay abreast. You know, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was a point. There was a point in the mid, you know, 20 teens, if you want to call it that, where I felt like maybe I was gonna get weeded out because that sound was just everything people wanted. They wanted that sound. There were people who are like, oh, I don't want to record drums. I want to program. We're requesting that, and I was like, for better or worse, I'm gonna die on this mountain. You know. Or I'm going to camp out here. I'm not going to get into programming drums.
Sure.
I'm not going to do that because
Right.
it's like feels like it's against my religion. You know what I mean? You know, I tell this to bands, and sometimes it goes in the wrong way. My goal is to always make that record sound like it came kind of out of the 90s. You know what I mean? I want vibe. I want raw, polished. That was our theme. Me and Damien, we would talk about that. Raw, polished. You think about like Korn, you know, Issues or you know, Follow the Leader. Those records, even Slipknot, Iowa, they're raw, but they're like hi-fi raw. You know what I mean? And that's all I wanted. And to me, I can't get raw when it's almost robotic. You know what I mean? Now you can spend hours and hours, and I know dudes who fucking murder it, spending the time to make the drums sound not robotic, right? And not sound fake. But at the end of the day, now you're getting to a point because everyone's doing it. Everyone's stuff is sounding the same. It's all sounding the same. They're all using the same samples, the same programs. Everyone's sounding the same.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm saying I'm going to die on that mountain. I'm going to record my own drums. I'm going to record my own guitars.
Sure.
I'm putting mics on amps. I have a large collection of amps. We're going to use them. And my stuff may not sound as, you know, trendy or modern as the stuff some of these other dudes are doing, but it's real and it's mine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's my art. That's kind of how I always look at it.
And if you don't have a drummer, or if your drummer sucks,
then we hire one. We
call
hire
Fernando Lemus.
Fernando Lemus. We get Fernando Lemus or
Right.
Nate Reyna from SKUM. You know,
Yeah.
bring him in. He's
a
champion.
great cat.
Yeah, he is.
He actually, when I interviewed with SKUM, I was really impressed by Nate's methodology about how he wanted to work the industry and promote SKUM. For a little
For a young dude, man, he's super smart.
Yeah, super smart and knows what the hell is going on the back end. But yeah, speaking of Fernando Lemus,
Love
I
him.
remember when you sent me the Plague record, the Apocalypse. I forgot what it was
Prophecies
called.
of the
Prophecies of the Apocalypse. I was like, holy smokes! Like that record. I don't know if you remember or not, but I gave that record #1 that year on our top 10.
I was proud of that, man.
And that record just blew me away. And I remember one of the things that really captivated me was the fact that it was just so heavy. It was a heavy record. And of course, Fernando was great. And then, but I remember also loving the bass lines in that record. That guy, that
He's a
bassist
monster,
guy,
yeah.
he's great. But you made him pop in that recording, so it was so great. Yeah.
Yeah, the cool thing about that record, man, is we were starting it at the beginning of the pandemic. And it was crazy because we were literally like, there's an actual plague happening, you know, and it felt like that, man. Yeah,
apocalypse.
Like we were supposed to be like quarantining. Like there was you remember there's that month where they were like, don't leave your house after 8 and you know don't stay away from people. We're gonna try and stop the spread and all that stuff. We were there in the studio making that album, man. And it was really cool because there was a bunch of weird stuff happening in the world at that time. And, you know, we were making that record and it was like literally it felt like the world was ending.
Sure.
And we were making the Prophecies of the Apocalypse.
Wow,
And it was pretty cool, man.
Very cool.
I love Isaac and all those guys.
Any other band that you would care to mention that are some of your favorites that you've had at ToneCrate?
Obviously Plague, you know, those guys have been with me for a while. Ammo, obviously those guys are like brothers to me. Yeah, man, there's quite a few. Nahaya, you know, as a band that has recorded with me multiple times that I really enjoy. There's some bands that are not metal that I've gotten to work with that I have become buddies with. brothers with a band called the Cardinal Health. Those guys, one of the guys, Jordan Williams, become like a brother to me. He used to own the 1011, that little music venue. I'm working with a band, Joseph Briones from Violent Practice. He's in another band that's like more of an indie rock band called Rumors. With the bass player of Jaime Monzon's band, Crown's Coffins, and that band fucking kicks ass. They're called Rumors, and the shit that we're doing, it's swanky, man. It's like swanky indie rock. It's sexy, it's got a vibe. It's real heavy bass lines. Joseph's a fucking top tier drummer.
I love his vibe.
He's a cool guy, man.
I've seen him play, and I didn't really realize, based upon just the release of the record, I remember when I went to go see them, that he sings.
I didn't know that he did that. He does backup vocals while he's drumming.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
He's super talented, man. And in the indie rock band Rumors, he plays to a metronome live. Like they play with tracks that make sound effects and stuff while they're jamming, and it's fucking awesome.
Is that harder to do?
Yeah,
right?
A lot of guys can't
do
do it.
Fuck up.
Yeah, then the whole thing's off. You have to be a monster pro.
Yeah.
I've
always wondered about that.
He teaches drumming. He's a badass. Yeah.
Those fuckers are crazy though.
Violent Practice.
Yeah. Those dudes are crazy.
Yeah, I love them, man. Those are cool guys. Those are cool guys too, man. Like I can't wait to work with those guys again one day.
What's his name again? I forget.
Adrian.
Yeah, I remember when we did the interview. He showed up. We were all just waiting for this fucker to get here so we could start. And the band was like, "Oh, fuck it, let's just do it, man. He'll just miss out." And then Joseph was like, "No, man, hold on." So he finally shows up, and he's a kind of crazy, wacky guy, and talking about all kinds of crazy stuff that he's done and doing, and women and drinking and drugging and shit. And
he's awesome.
Every time I see him, he says, "Rob, we need to get together, man, and hang out and party." I'm like, "Yeah, dude, for sure." But I'm kind of apprehensive about it because I'm like, "Fuck."
He has a good time, man. He knows how to have a good time.
Oh man, yeah. Okay, now the follow-up question is, who would you say are some of the metal bands that you've worked with? Who are some of the best musicians that you think, you have your fave that you vibe with, but who were guys that really came into the studio and kind of impressed you with either their playing or their singing or whatever?
Kevin Talley.
Oh yeah,
he was in Dying
drummer.
Fetus.
Yeah,
fucking amazing. Lyle Cooper, again, a drummer.
Yeah.
Fernando Lemus.
Yeah,
it's usually the drummers, man.
The
that
drummers
are like fucking awesome. There's a lot of good guitar players. Sebastian Elizondo. He was in Darkness Divided, and then he was in Shattered
I know that
Sun.
cat. He doesn't like me, but I respect his playing.
No, he's a fucking great player.
I remember that cat when he was a young cat and he was kind of overweight. When he was with Darkness Divided, and then I've seen him kind of evolve.
He had a glow up.
And get better at what he does. Yeah,
a big fan of him. One of my good buddies, his name is Brody Rainey. He played in a band called Wastelanders, and now he jams with a Deftones tribute band called Bloody Cape, which is fucking awesome. Bloody Cape, the Deftones tribute band, sometimes sounds better than real Deftones. If you ever get a chance to check those guys out. I mean, I don't know if you're into tribute bands, but I mean, they have a huge set and they murder it. It's badass.
That's the thing, though. If I'm gonna go see a cover band, then they better be fucking good. Yeah,
man, they bring it. I'm a huge Deftones fan. I mean, Deftones might be one of my favorite bands, top two at least, and they fucking kill it. Brody's a great guitar player as well. Vocalists, one of my buddies, Steve Tenen, he used to be in Silence and Messenger. Currently sings for a national band called Within the Ruins.
Didn't you do a Silence and Messenger record?
Yeah.
Which one did you do? Was it the first one or the second one?
The first EP called Buried. Yeah, that was one of my first Deadroom EP releases.
Oh, really?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, when I go back, it actually surprisingly aged kind of well, but I hear it and I'm like, ugh, man.
Yeah.
It's old. That's old Clif, I didn't have all my shit together, but I'm thankful they gave me an opportunity. They opened a lot of doors for me. Kobe, Jacob Lang from Cerebral is a monster. Bass player Mark from Ammo, incredible musician,
Yeah.
songwriter. He writes a majority of the lyrics for Ammo, so he's a huge part of that driving force of like what makes that band super cool. He's one of my favorite bass players. Joe from Cerebral is a great bass player. There's a lot of really talented guys here in town.
So many, and that's one of the things that I'm really proud of too. Is like the cloth of San Antonio metal just never seems to kind of subside, and that's a great thing. I see a lot of young cats who are coming up, and I'm like, damn, these dudes are talented. I'm not sure if you heard of Voltrus?
Voltreus?
I say it Voltrus.
Oh, okay. I could be saying it wrong. I don't know. Yeah,
I don't know how you say it.
I've had a couple of like conversations with those guys about doing some stuff.
I think those guys are one of the really kind of cutting edge bands right now. Their singer's like sick, and I think him and the guitar player.
What do you mean by sick?
Like he's like his vocal style. He does like 3 different vocal styles in a song.
Oh, I think maybe he had like cancer or something.
No.
I was like, whoa,
I mean,
like
sick, like
he's
badass.
badass. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's
like,
like,
oh fuck, man.
Yeah.
Hopefully that guy's all right.
They're amazing.
There's not a lot of bands that I have like a wish list to work with, but they were on that list. I don't remember if I reached out to them or they reached out to me, but we were like talking for a little bit. I don't know what they're doing right now.
We need to. They're about to drop. They're about to drop. I
think
2 singles
with my buddy Chris.
I know that they released a song last year, and they did it with Mora.
Yeah.
And then the 2 new singles, they did with Limas. The 2 new singles that are going to come out. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, with Fernando.
Well, I'm not trying to snag anyone from those dudes, but I mean, I'd love to work with them.
Yeah.
If they're going to come do the tour, the San Antonio studio tour, I want my turn.
They'll be here next month.
Well, make it happen.
I am going to talk to them and get them to graduate to Stone Creek. But to me, they're like one of the young bands that I'm really excited about, and there's never been any age requirement or experience requirement to be on Rob's, but I just have to love your vibe and your music, and those dudes are like at the top of my list. I really dig them.
That's cool. Yeah, I definitely want to work with them at some point.
And as we talk about kind of new young bands, and I mentioned this earlier about some of the changes we're seeing in our music scene. What if someone asked you, what would you say are like some of the most relevant changes that you've seen? Good and bad. I mean, as far as what's happening out there, because I've seen you at some shows. You go out and support bands, and I'm a little older than you, but you're here, and I'm talking about like this is what's kind of happening
the young cats.
Here.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen actually, thankfully, I mentioned earlier about dying on that mountain of keeping things real and raw.
Right.
I've noticed a lot of young dudes are wanting raw, natural drums.
Right.
Hey, we don't want to program anything, and seeking me out because of what I've done, and it was kind of like a cool full circle moment for me, where it's like it paid off. Sticking to my guns, because I never stopped recording real drums. I've been doing it for 15 years now, and there's guys that want what I have to offer now. You know what I mean? Again, it's becoming popular again to have real drums. I think the trend is over, or it's dying. Of
I
having
think people are becoming more and more aware
sensitive to it.
Of what you said earlier.
Yeah.
It's all kind of sounding.
The mojo needs to come back. People are starting to take a little bit more pride in their playing. SKUM's a good example of that. Those guys were very adamant about things being a certain way, which I appreciated, especially given how young they are. I respect their vision. So I've noticed that like a lot of guys are starting to want to do more raw, natural vibe.
It's good.
I would say also there is still a trend of dudes wanting to record themselves. If you're talking about on the bad end, you know what I mean? Like, oh, not bad, but just,
I don't get it. I don't understand it. I mean, it's like, dude, okay, I'm a musician, I'm a guitar player, whatever. Focus on writing good songs. Why do you want to go into a whole different arena. Yeah, it's your music and it's music, but focus on writing good songs with your band and let the dude who does the recording do the recording.
People, I think, like I said, I'm not going to take credit for anything like that, but I think they think because of how software is and how it's progressed and gotten easier and easier and easier to get good sounds, that they believe that they can put together a quality product on their own. But I've had to tell people a few times, like I've been doing this for 15 years, full time, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, sometimes more. I'll sometimes spend 30, 40 hours on mixing one song. Even still, sometimes I just want to try a bunch of stuff out and figure out what I like, fine tune it, put it to the side, start over, do another version, spend 15, 20 hours working on that. I love it. I mean, it's like sculpting. I enjoy it. I want to play around. And even with that, with the dedication and to the craft that I have, and as long as I've been doing it, it's very difficult. It's not easy to get things to sound the way that they sound, the way that we're used to hearing things sound. It's big, that pop, things sounding exciting, clear, the clarity, the fidelity, the bigness, the width, the space, the vibe, the mojo. It's very hard. It never gets easy. You know what I mean? It gets easier. I'm getting there quicker.
Sure.
I can mix a song in 2 or 3 hours now, if I'm in a rush and I have to. I'll force myself to put it down, and it'll sound okay. Sound great. But I just think that people sometimes don't take that into consideration. Like, you have a guy that's been doing this for 15 years, and I'm telling you, it's difficult. Like, how do you think you're gonna make it sound with no experience? You know what I mean?
That's my point. I don't get it.
And now some people are outliers. You know what I mean? Like some guys are have an ear and can figure it out fast. Yeah. Real fast. Yeah. And they can make some shit that sounds cool fast. They learn real young.
But that's a small percentage of.
But it's a small percentage of people, and I just think that. Yeah, I think to me, like you were saying to your token, that having an outsider offer some feedback and kind of force the band to make decisions is very valuable. And they don't get that when they're all in their own environment, spending hours and hours and hours dicking around with stuff that's not important. I think that's another, we could probably, if we're going to explore that, I think guys will sweat about things that are on the large scale not important, and they won't sweat stuff that is very important, right? So the focus is in the wrong place. For me, I sometimes, to the discomfort of some bands, will glaze over things that they want to spend a lot of time on, because I'm like, at the end of the day, the juice isn't worth the squeeze on that kind of a idea, right? We're not going to spend 4 hours exploring that when it's not going to make this song any better or any worse. You know what I mean? Like, let's just roll with this because it works. You know what I mean? And then on the contrary, I'll sit there for 2 hours and make them do something 15,000 times, and they're like, is that it? And I'm like, almost. You know what I mean? So it's like, the attention needs to be distributed properly.
If I was a musician, I would think, I wrote this song, I play it all the time, my band and I rehearse it all the time, and it's like you're too close to the painting to provide any new perspective or analysis on this song, just because you're so inundated with it by rehearsing it. So when you bring in a producer or someone from the outside to say, okay, I have a fresh new a guy who's going to take a look at this and give me a fresh new perspective.
Yeah. I mean,
that's so important. I think that's
valuable.
important.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. Okay, let's move on. I want to talk next about another kind of endeavor that you do with production, and that is your ToneCrate profiles that you make available. And first of all, again, because there's people out there who will watch this, and we're not, engineers and producers, but if someone said, "What's ToneCrate?" I don't know what that is. What is it?
It's a digital Kemper profile service. We're an online store that sells Kemper profiles. So a Kemper is the name of a digital guitar amp, right?
It's like this big, right?
Yeah, about yay high. It fits in a rack. It's green.
So you have a Kemper, and then you just kind of create your own tones?
Yeah. So what you do, it's not a amp modeler. So an amp modeler is something that is like software that is mimicking a guitar amp.
Mimicking a Marshall
This is
or something.
this is an amp profiler. And so what it does is you actually are miking up a real amp,
Right.
and you're setting up the Kemper in the chain of this amp,
Right.
and it sends a bunch of pulses through the amp, sine waves and stuff, and it clones. It takes a snapshot of that exact guitar sound, and it's virtually indiscernible from the amp itself when you go back and forth between the profile and the actual amp.
And where do you save it? Save it in the Kemper?
You save it in the Kemper,
Wow.
and it works with the computer. There's a controller on the computer that you can clean it up or do whatever you want to it, name it. And when I got the Kemper, a friend of mine, I didn't believe in it. I don't typically, I said I'm an amp guy. I like miking amps, those kinds of things. I just never believed in. I kept hearing about it. Then I heard Sneap talk about it, and he was like, he's like, I did Kemper guitars on, it was like a not Saxon, Accept or something like that. It was like an Accept record. He's like, half the songs were Kemper, and I was like, okay, like that's interesting. And then Mac was like, bro, the Kemper's the real deal.
So if you, let's say you dub a Marshall into the Kemper, whatever, any combination of amps into the Kemper, then someone else, if they buy the profile, they have to have a Kemper too, and then they can play their guitar through the Kemper, and it'll sound like that. Okay, I'm getting it.
You got it.
I got it.
No, you got it 100%. Yeah, so it's like essentially it's like if we had an amp here and a Kemper here, we can take a profile of your amp here, and you could send it to your buddy in Canada through an email, and he'll have the sound of your amp in your room here in Canada.
That's crazy.
So when I got the Kemper, when I finally decided, okay, I believe in this, I was shocked at how bad most of the profiles sounded that came with the Kemper.
Okay, right.
So then it was like none of these none of these profiles sound good to my ear. So I'm going to make my own.
Right.
And I also want to see what people are selling, right? Because there was at the time some companies that were already sort of selling profiles online. So I bought a couple. Some friends gave me a few, and I just wasn't really enjoying any of it. So I decided to make my own, and I'm like, oh, well, I like the way that sounds. I decided to share it with a few friends. I got great feedback on it. And then at that time, I had just, my son was very young. The studio was doing okay. I went on that national podcast, and a lot of people were starting to follow me on social media. My followers were going up and all this stuff, and I was really hungry to do something new, entrepreneurial, but within the music space. And I've always been fascinated with like Netflix model, subscriptions. And so I was like, I bet I could make a subscription service based off the Kemper profiles. And so that was the initial idea. And then as I was doing more, research and thinking more about how to kind of bring this thing attention, I was speaking with another individual in the industry that had a lot of success building a subscription service of a different kind. And he told me flat out, nobody knows you. No one gives a shit about you in a very respectful way.
Sure.
So no one's going to care about this.
Right.
It's like you have to give people a reason to care.
Right.
And the only thing that people are going to care about is names.
Right.
He's like, you need to get names on these profiles. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, we got to get famous dudes.
And you've had many.
I was, a combination of lucky and fortunate and tenacious to just make it happen.
So just to name a few so people know, like, you've created profiles with Rob Arnold of Chimera, Dave Davidson, who I love from Revocation, love him a lot. David Sanchez from Havoc. I mean, these are prominent, kind of respected names.
Alex
in the
Wade
scene.
from Whitechapel.
Yeah, for sure. Alex Wade, yeah. And others. So, if you do a collaboration, let's say like with Rob Arnold, and I remember, I go way back with Rob Arnold.
Love Rob, man.
How does that work? So does Rob Arnold have to go to Stone Creek, and then you and he mix or put together a combination of amps and create a profile? Is that how it happens?
Yeah. So when I met up with Rob, I was still doing Deadroom.
Oh, okay.
So ToneCrate predates Stone Creek.
Oh, wow.
And so Rob came to my house.
Nice.
And I had a really nice setup in my home. And we sat there and we talked a lot about his idea, his philosophy around his guitar tone and what makes it what it is, and the different things they've done on different records, and shared a lot of really great stories with me about those processes. He got to work with Andy Sneap, we got to talk about that a lot, and and then we actually start putting mics on amps and moving buttons around and moving things around until he's like, yeah, this is it. This is it. And then we put it in let the Kemper do the thing. And then then the marketing, obviously got to make it look nice. And I found just fucking awesome dudes, man. My buddy Mel Torres in California is doing all my video, all my commercials. Yep. I have a graphic designer, Matt Thompson, in a band called St. Peeler in Austin, who does corporate like branding, logos and things. It does like my booklets, and had Colton Holiday from Panic Division, Carbon 12 back in the day, do my logo. And you know what I'm talking about? Not cheap. That dude's not cheap. Sure. I mean, that shit. He wants all the money for his work, but he's dope. He does a great job, so I pay it. Shout out to Colton. And I just really cared about the aesthetic. I wanted to make sure that if anyone saw it, they wouldn't think, oh, this is some guy in a house. Like they would think. And then funny, Dave Davidson, when he came through, he was like, this is really cool. He's like, I thought I was going to be like in a boardroom with like dudes in suits and stuff. Like he thought that we were like a corporation, And so like I got that a lot, and that made me proud. You know what I mean? Because I was like, I wanted that. Like, I wanted people to I wanted the whole thing to feel expensive, so people, and I think I succeeded with that, and so, you hit it right on the head. We have a few amps. I usually would ask the guys up front, hey, is there anything specific that you want, that you would like here? I would go find them if I didn't own them already. That's how I have such a large amp collection now. It's just, as I started trying new amps out, I'm like, I love the way that sounds. Now I got to get one. So I'd buy them. I have like 10 or 12 amps now. But, yeah.
So if a musician said, I want the Rob Arnold profile, they can contact you and get a subscription of it?
So we recently actually, after almost 5 years, just discontinued the subscription aspect of the service. Okay. So we're only doing straight up traditional store model now. So anytime we do a pack, it's just going straight to the web store and you can just buy it. So
and download it.
Download it, that's it. No subscription.
How much is a Kemper?
About, if you're buying one new, about $1,800. Yeah, you can find them used for like $12.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's cool. I've always kind of wondered about that.
Yeah.
Who did you like working most with on the ToneCrate stuff? Who did you have a good time with? I know
Scott Carstairs from Fallujah.
Really?
Yeah, man. Him and I just broed out. I mean, we watched movies together.
Nice.
Smoked a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, he's a fucking awesome dude, man. Alex Wade was a professional. Really great dude.
Does he use the 8-string or 7-string guitar?
Yeah.
So
sevens.
Sevens?
Yeah.
So you tell these dudes, I mean, when they come, obviously, they bring the guitars?
Yeah, they fly in with their guitar, because that's a large part of what those guys are familiar with.
Sure.
That's a variable we can control.
That's why I kind of mentioned that.
Brody Utley from the band Rivers of Nile was the first guy, apart from like Kevin Talley, that was, I think, and I got to give him credit, that he took the chance on me, and came down and flew down and did this. And without him, I don't think I would have gotten many of these other guys. So it's like I always pay mad respect to Brody from Rivers for they're on Metal Blade. Yep. You familiar? You heard their stuff?
Yep.
Fucking awesome band, man. And him coming in and doing that pack. He saw that I worked with Lyle Cooper. And Lyle, we went to high school together, right? And so Lyle, you know, paid him. He came on board, did the thing. We did drum samples. He's a drummer. I got Kevin, and, you know, he's Dying Fetus, Chimera. And because of those two dudes, Brody was like, oh, well, you know, if those guys were cool with doing this, then I'll do it.
Sure.
And then once he was in, then Alex saw Brody, and then Dave Davidson saw Alex, and then Rob Arnold saw everyone, and, you know, it all just went from there. So, yeah, it was pretty cool.
Nice. Yeah, well, that's great, man. I hope that you continue to get some new cats in there.
Yeah. I'm taking a little break from it right now.
Yeah.
You know, I got a lot going on.
Sure.
I'm actually right now dabbling with a promotional products company, doing something. And I'm just kind of not taking a break from the studio, not taking a break from ToneCrate. I'm just diversifying a little bit right now.
Sure.
So I'm doing like promotional products and stuff like that.
You are the
companies.
entrepreneur, my man.
Yeah, trying to, man.
Musical entrepreneur in our city.
Thank you.
Cliff, as we end out this interview, just a couple of other things. I talked about a Start a War record that you recorded, and I even saw y'all play at Fitz. And I still listen to that record. Is that something that still interests you? Kind of being in a band or playing music live?
I think about it. It's kind of one of those things. It's like the mafia or something. Like once you're in, you're never really out.
Right,
you know what I mean? Like I think about it. It's something that is always in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
You know, but making that record was exhausting for me.
Yeah.
You know,
emotionally exhausting.
Yeah, and it took a lot of my time. And you know, Damien was a big part of that.
Yeah.
Man. He helped me through that.
His vocals on that record are pretty sick.
He's badass, man. Yeah, he was out of his comfort zone with that, but he just gave me exactly what I wanted, man. In my mind, you know, transparently, I wanted to make a Darkest Hour record. You know what I mean? Like that's what I wanted to do. And you know, Darkest Hours changed their sound, and At the Gates had not. I think had just put out that At War with Reality record, so I was like super inspired, and I was like, I want to do something that sounds like a cross between those two things, like that At the Gates stuff with the Darkest Hour, the old Darkest Hour stuff. And put that together, and I'm glad I did it because it gave me perspective of the other side. Because I had a vision for that, and I remember Damien was kind of like co-producing that with me, and he kept pitching these ideas, and I'm like, they were good ideas, but that weren't what was in my brain. And I would see, you know, at times we would butt heads a little bit because he's like, you can come out of that box, and I can't come out of that box. Like I don't want to come out of that box.
Right.
I need this to sound a certain way. And that isn't something that sounds like what's in that box.
Right.
Even though that's cool as hell, it isn't. And so it actually helped me perspective-wise to move forward in my own productions with other bands in terms of respecting their visions.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And like understanding, I was that guy.
Yeah. You're the flip side now.
Exactly.
So you get it now.
But it is exhausting.
I always, like I said earlier, I think, you know, if you're going to pay a producer to come in and help record your music, that, you know, that's expected, you know, to get that feedback. But I think as the producer, you also have to, you know, tread that ground pretty delicately.
Yeah.
You don't want to mess up the vibe in the studio.
Right.
And that can easily happen, right?
Sometimes, yeah.
Has that ever happened to you before?
Not often. Not often.
Who's not gonna like you?
No, I mean, I appreciate that. Most of the time, if it ever does, it's the band with with themselves. You know what I mean? They'll argue about the detail, and I'm like, you guys are both right, but y'all should figure that out on your own.
They don't say, "What do you think, man?"
Yeah. They do, and I just like, here's what I think. I'm brutally honest, man. People always tell me that.
You know, you said, you know, it's once you're kind of like a musician, live musician, it's always difficult to get out of it, and it made me think of Julian Cruz, the promoter. Do you know Julian Cruz?
Yeah.
He plays in he just did his first show in a Killswitch Engage cover band.
Oh, okay, cool.
And I saw a little bit of video of it, and then he called me. He says, "Did you see the video?" I said, "Yeah." I go, "How was it?" He goes, "Oh man, it was exhausting." And I said, "Did you do a song or two?" He goes, "No, I did a whole set." And I was like, "Dude," he goes, "after I got off the stage, I fell to the ground." He goes, "I need to lose weight." I said, "Yeah, man." I said, I can't imagine being up there performing for a whole set, and he was singing.
Wow.
And wow, yeah. So
that's cool, man.
Yeah,
I haven't talked to him in a long time.
He's went up there and did that, and he's been long departed from bands and playing. So it made
I
me
recorded
think
a lot of his bands.
Yeah, yeah. Old Covina, right? Is that old?
Yeah,
old
he was
Covina?
originally in Covina.
Yeah.
And then he was in a band called Years of Red Skies before that.
Yeah,
and I got to work with those guys.
Yeah. Let's talk about real quick. You've mentioned his name several times, Andy Sneap. I saw on social media that you got to have lunch with him.
Yeah.
How the fuck did that happen?
Man, dude, I don't know, man. I'm like a fanboy.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know what I mean? Like that guy's like one of my heroes. And I've been following Andy pretty much since I started listening to metalcore, man. Like he did that Killswitch Engage End of Heartache record. That was the first time. I remember the first time I heard Killswitch Engage End of Heartache. That was the first time I ever said, this recording sounds incredible. That's the first time the recording stood out to me because of how good it was.
Right.
And this was pre me being in recording. I could tell it just sounded incredible. And that's when I started, becoming aware of him. Andy Sneap was, he had a forum online that was essentially a breeding ground for almost every major producer in the metal community right now. All were on that forum.
Wow.
And like the early 2000s, Mark Lewis was on there.
Yeah.
Guys like that, Jason Suecof.
Yeah.
Some of the dudes in Europe, you know what I mean? Like lots of dudes,
Wow.
I was on there as well. And we were all like in the early 2000s. I mean, just talking about what Sneap was doing and trading recordings with each other, mic techniques. Like it was like a hub for knowledge, all in a community. It was the coolest thing ever. It was Andy Sneap Forum.
It was online?
Online.
Wow.
Yeah, it was called Ultimate Metal Forum, and it was the Andy Sneap. It was a message board, man. So I'm a huge fan of Andy, and weird, man. When I started ToneCrate, a gentleman subscribed to the service, and there was a time in the very beginning where I was messaging everyone when they would subscribe and thank them, personally introduce myself, like work in the business.
Sure.
And one guy tells me, I'm in the UK, I'm in England, and I actually work with Colin Richardson. Do you know Colin?
Yep.
Yeah. So Colin was Andy's mentor.
Wow.
And Colin is a fucking incredible producer himself, and him and Andy did a bunch of good records together. Machine Head back in the day. What's that for? The Burn My Eyes, right? They did that together, and many records they did together. And I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, you're working with Colin Richardson, dude? And he was like, yeah. And so him and I hit it off because we were kind of at similar points in our career. Like, we were doing good work, but like, we're not recording like big dogs.
I guess that means
you know what I mean?
Colin doesn't use Kemper.
Colin does use Kemper.
Now he does.
Yeah. I mean, he does. So they, well, I'll get to that. Yeah, it's interesting. But anyways, I'm getting to know this guy. He's getting to know Colin. They're working together. Well, Colin and him work out of Andy's studio, right? Out there. He's kind of got an isolated spot as well. It's super cool. So I don't know how or why, but I mean, I followed Andy on Instagram, and I posted a video of me miking some guitar cabs, and I tagged him in the video, and I said, I'm just trying to, be as good as Andy Sneap, right? And he commented on the post, and he was like, don't do that shit like that. Like, that's not going to work. And he corrected me on a social media comment.
Did he send you a DM or?
No, it was public. It was awesome though. I was like, wow, fuck yeah. Like, Andy's like schooling me on my own Instagram, right? And
but what do you mean don't do that?
Okay, so what I was
like the way that you were miking it, or not to mention his name, or what?
No, yeah. So I'll tell you exactly what I was doing. So and it's something I see a lot of people do, and I'm just like, Andy told me not to do that, but you're fucking up now. Because now that I know better and I've heard the difference, So what I was doing is I was essentially playing it's not a game, but I make it a game. I was playing a game where I was moving a mic around on different speakers to try to find which speaker was the best in this particular guitar cab. I found the best speaker, in my opinion, and then now I'm messing with the placement of it, moving it left and right until I feel it sounds the best. And once I found the best spot, I would mark it with tape, right? And so then I made the post. I was like, hey, I'm moving the mic around, found the spot, and Andy comments, he's like, take that fucking tape off. He's like, it's gonna ruin your face, right? And I was like, what? I never thought of that. It didn't make sense to me. So I did what he said. I recorded a line of guitar with the tape on. I took the tape off and recorded the same line of guitar, and the difference was spectacular. It sounded so different just from having tape around the mic. It changed the sound completely. And I would have never thought that would ever affected it. But once he pointed it out and I heard it myself, I'm like, I'm never gonna put tape on the guitar cab ever again. And then he came through with Judas Priest a few years ago, and Jaime from Crown's Coffins takes photos for the Current, right?
For the Current, yeah.
So I noticed he took a bunch of badass pictures of Sneap. I saw him, saved him. So I DM'd him to Sneap. I was like, hey, man, saw you were in town. One of my clients took some great photos of you. Here they are. And he replied, thanks, man. That's awesome. Okay, cool. Left it alone. A year later, he wins a Grammy for Dream Theater. The moment I found out, I'll just message him. Hey, man, congrats on the Grammy. Thanks, mate. He replied again. So I'm like, cool. Left it alone.
But he knows you're a producer and engineer.
Yeah, because of my Instagram, right?
Right.
And I think he noticed we had some mutual friends or something.
Okay.
And he had, and so anyways, I hear Judas Priest is coming to town. And if you scroll back on Andy's Instagram, you notice he's got a picture in front of the Alamo. And so I was like, he will go out and walk around, right? So
most people won't recognize him.
Yeah,
probably not.
Well, he says otherwise now because of Judas Priest.
Yeah,
apparently their fans are pretty rabid. I would have never realized that people like showing up to their hotels and stuff, like waiting for them.
Crazies.
It's weird. Yeah, and so anyways, I just get a wild hair and I just shoot him an Instagram message. I said, hey man, I noticed you're going to be in town for a couple of days doing Judas Priest. Would love to buy you lunch and chat with you if you're down. And he said, sure.
Wow.
Just like that. And so he told me, hey, we're actually hubbing out of San Antonio for all of our Texas dates. So I'll be there for the week. And then we made a date, planned it, went.
Where'd you take him?
We went to this little Mexican spot on the Riverwalk. He's vegan. I didn't know that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there was a spot that he goes to habitually in San Antonio that does like vegan stuff on the Riverwalk, vegan tacos. And so we went there and, man, shared some fucking awesome stories. Then he was like, are you going to the show? And I was like, I'd like to, but I don't have tickets yet. Hooked me up with like 5th row, dead center, Judas Priest.
Nice.
Just 2 tickets. When I showed up, I mean, there was an envelope with like Judas Priest, like monogramming on the envelope with my name on it. So, dude, we took a selfie together. So I ended up. This is how much of a fucking nerd fanboy I am of Sneap. I actually printed an 8x10 of that selfie, and I'm in the process of like framing that shit in. Yeah, just like your stuff, man. You know, like
for sure.
Super cool, man. Like I'm. That's like a moment that'll always like be special for me.
That's cool, man, and it's only gonna get better from there.
Hopefully, man.
Hopefully,
thank you.
Yeah, that's cool. I remember. I didn't really know Andy Sneap, and his work really made an impact on me when he did the first Pissing Razors record.
Yeah, I know you're a big fan of Pissing Razors.
Yeah.
I went and listened to that
first record
for the first time because we had a lunch together, and when we had lunch, we were talking, and he was like, "Yeah, I used to work with a lot of bands in San Antonio. There was a label, Noise,
Noise Records,
and he was like, I was their main guy.
He did Face of Anger." This band called Face
From
of
here in
Anger.
town?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know this cat. He's a singer. Oh, God damn, what's his name? He's actually a buddy from mine. He just called me not too long ago. Frazier. Do you know Frazier, a black dude?
I know the name.
Yeah, his name's
name
Frazier.
Sounds familiar.
They used to be called Art of War. And then it was the same dudes in the band. And I remember when they did the record with Sneap, they changed the name to Face of Anger.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you know, Face of Anger was okay, you know, but the recording was amazing.
That Pissing Razors record sounds good.
And they were on Noise Records too. And you know who could have been too was the old band Alienation. Could have recorded with Sneap.
Robin Lewis. Or Sean. Who's
that was
Sean?
after. That was after. No, that was the first incarnation. The second incarnation of Alien was with Mondo Tovar and Shane Prashant.
Troy Doubler.
Yeah, Troy Doubler. Yeah. But they didn't take the deal with Noise. They turned it down.
I wonder why.
Stupidity.
What if they got a better deal?
No.
They got no deal?
Hey, I don't know if they weren't happy with the deal or they thought something better was coming along. I've had so many conversations about that decision with Troy here and with Mondo here. Yeah. And I think they both regretted it. But at least, you know, it might not have been a good deal, but still they were going to record with Sneap because he was doing all of Noise's artists. And at least they would have had a recording that would have lasted forever. And I'm sure it would have got some distribution. But yeah. The crazy history of metal in our city.
Dude, it's amazing, yeah.
It's amazing, and so many great things, and you know.
It's weird. I made just a career pretty much exclusively recording metal and rock.
Yeah.
Just really here and regionally. And that's how much of it there is.
And it's never going to stop, my friend. I don't think so. All right, Cliff. I've kept you long enough. Anything I missed? Any last words you want to share with people around the world who will watch this interview?
Yeah, man. I guess if I could, I don't know. I'll pay respects to, you know, the guys that came before me, man. You know, one of my mentors early on was a dude named Orlando Villaseñor. You know, he was a huge inspiration and mentor for me, like a brother. You know, obviously Mac. You know, Bobby. Rest in peace to him. And a lot of the guys in town, man, Keith Krause, you know, from Monster Music, you know, those dudes are fucking awesome, man. Awesome guys, great people, and got a lot of respect for them. You know, obviously you know what I mean? I've been watching the show since, you know, I was 14 years old on public access.
Now you're making me feel old.
Nah, man. No, it's cool,
You're like,
man.
you are old.
Nah, man. It's beautiful, man. Like, it's beautiful, and, yeah, it's really cool to be here, and, yeah, man, I just, you know, I'm going to give thanks to everyone that, you know, helped me have what I have right now.
Right. I only see things getting bigger and better, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother, man.
Thank you, Clifton, for coming back for round 2. It's been my pleasure to have you. We covered a lot of ground. Remember, everyone out there, the man and Mac Damon run their studio called Stone Creek Sound. All you bands out there who want a killer-ass recording, all you got to do is go to this man right here. He will help you out. You saw CLIFTON Miles only right here on Rob's MetalWorks.